but the lower 3 miles is not so able to be utilized.
This is a sad reminder of the legacy of anthracite coal mining for our region.
Sometimes people in this area saw the land as something to take advantage of.
The money went, the wealth went out, and the scars were left behind sort of as a memory of that.
When the anthracite companies came to this area, especially during the era of surface mining, that they took advantage of it. And when coal was no longer seen as a major commodity, they left the area without having to be mandated to clean up the area. And then that becomes even more complicated with the Knox mine disaster, that when in fact that coal mining really was a part of the past at that point in this area, that we tried to revive it. Knox mine disaster floods the mines. We try to pump it out, just bringing in more mine acid into the Susquehanna River.
This is a sad reminder of the legacy of anthracite coal mining for our region. And it's a visible one because it's orange, it's an orange rock. But there are lots of other visible legacies of anthracite mining. You don't have to go far in Old Forge or Pittston area to find a waste coal pile. You don't have to go far to find a silt pond. We have plenty of other streams and creeks that have the same sort of problems that the Lackawanna River has because of acid mine drainage.
That 30-inch borehole right there is the single largest point discharge of pollution in the entire Chesapeake Bay. When the acid mine drain comes out of here, it's got zero oxygen in it. So here is the first place that it picks up any oxygen. So it starts to oxidize immediately from this point on.
The people, sometimes the attitude that we got from all that was that seeing the land scarred so much, we felt that it was okay to damage it even more. And we definitely took advantage of it for personal profits or whatever it might be.
Well, from a historical standpoint, I think the really big question is the history of labor struggle that's been left behind, and there are a number of really notable examples of that, not just in the sense of regional history, but actually from the standpoint of national labor history. And the Molly Maguires spring to mind. Some 18 Irish immigrant miners were executed in the 1870s on allegations that they were engaged in violent conspiracies against mine owners. There's the Latimer Massacre, in which a number of Eastern European coal miners were gunned down near Hazleton during a strike. There are many such examples. General strike in Scranton in 1877. Also, part of that was a massacre. And then there's the memory of the Breaker Boys, who were the child laborers, some as young as 7 years old, who worked in the mine heads, separating anthracite coal from slate. And you'll talk to many people around here who that memory lives with them. Will tell you that their grandfather or great-grandfather was a breaker boy. So I think that the memory of the struggle is alive for many people in the area.
The people of Danville, just downstream in the Lackawanna, or in the Susquehanna River, their water source for drinking is the Susquehanna River. at Danville, just downstream, an hour from here. And, I'm not sure they would want to hear a story about we're going to raise their taxes because we want to clean up the Old Forge borehole. For so many people, dilution is the solution. And they just think that, because there's so much water in the Susquehanna River and so much more water in the Chesapeake Bay and unlimited amounts of water in the Atlantic Ocean that, by then it doesn't matter. The reality is it matters a lot. It's unacceptable to have, iron oxide at that kind of rate flowing into any body of water from the smallest little river like the Lackawanna to the Atlantic Ocean. We should do more to prevent this and to stop it from happening. We can't prevent it, but we can stop it.
I think it really underlines the tragedy of the history here because, as is very well known, the coal mining here produced enormous wealth. All of the or many of the great industrial figures of the last century, including J.P. Morgan, had a hand in the pot and took a lot of money out of here. Of course, that money was based on the extraction of this resource. So the money went, the wealth went out, and the scars were left behind, sort of as a memory of that.
I don't know if it's out of sight or out of mind in that lower 3 miles of the Lackawanna, unless you're in the vicinity of Old Forge more directly, or if you've flown over that area and can really see the amount of environmental pollution and damage that's gone on to the lower 3 miles because it's so visually striking. But what we are trying to do is increase that awareness and outreach in the surrounding communities and even statewide with our legislators and with our politicians and state funders and corporate funders to really address the issue of the water pollution coming from not only Old Forge, but the Duryea outfall, which is connected and not too far down the road near Coxton. And that's just one watershed that we're taking a look at, that we really need to kind of raise not only the level of awareness, but the importance of the need to clean up that pollution problem.
There are many people who don't know a lot about it, and I would say for an older generation, there are those who really want to remember, and we have local history events here. Every year there's the Curran lecture on anthracite mining history, and we'll get a really good turnout, but not from students. They're older generation of people. But I've met some older people around here who really don't want to forget, don't want to remember, who view the memory of the coal mining history here as painful. So it kind of cuts both ways.
One of the sad things that we have seen that has come out of all this is that sometimes people in this area saw the land as something to take advantage of. And as a result of that, they often use the side of the roads as garbage dumps, as a means of just getting rid of the unwanted stuff that they had. So we had a process that was necessary of re-educating people about how beautiful this area is and the fact that we need to take care of the environment. Now, I'm seeing wonderful efforts being made with regard to the Lackawanna River.
But that alone should be enough to drive us to do something. But it's also the Old Forge borehole, and the inaction there is also a sad reminder of government's unwillingness or inability sometimes to solve problems.
Well, I think the people that are most impacted would be anybody who lives downstream of that area. The people that live upstream, where some of the impacts are actually coming from when we lose the water into the underground mine pools, may not even realize that that's occurring. And so with the amount of sort of past mining practices that have gone on, and we lose a lot of the streams to these underground mine workings, that typically isn't understood by most people very often. We think of stormwater and we think of problems with our storm drains and streams rising. In those areas up in the upper Lackawanna Valley, a lot of streams are dry and they only flow when there's storm events. And when those happen, that water tends to either make its way to the river or it gets infiltrated down into the mine workings, because that Scranton Metro mine pool area is such a large area. It goes from Old Forge all the way up to Archibald underneath the ground, and that sort of bathtub of the underground mines is filled with that water that comes out in Old Forge for, for the amount of water that we're talking about. I think, as Bernie McGurl even said, it's the size of like 2 Lackawanna Paul packs filled up is the amount of water in billions. I think 160 billion gallons of water alone are up there in that particular basin that we're having to look at.
Some of the remnants of coal mining, I find to be interesting to see, and I think it's actually a pity that we don't have a single breaker left. And to imagine, I think for an older generation, what it would have been like to grow up here where there were these breakers off in all directions, and of course all of the problems, the coal dust that was associated with that. But I think it's difficult for us who've never seen that to realize what that must have been like. And it would have been nice to have preserved just one, but that ship has sailed.
There were a million flaws with the way we did natural gas development in the state, but at the very least, we at least set up a few funds to try and attack some environmental problems. One of the positive things that we did with the natural gas development. There are other things that are very lacking.
One of the things that I am seeing as a positive is that America's corporate structure is really starting to see the fact that being good stewards of the environment is not only important for all of us, but important for their own corporate profits. That people are identifying with companies that are taking care of the environment and are doing positive things. So I think that if the government, we are under a capitalist system, but if the government is going to work with corporations, and corporations are going to have some sort of incentive of why it's good, whether it's they're getting more customers or whether they're able to take advantage of some government subsidies. I think that cooperation in the societies we have it today isn't going to be a necessary part of cleaning up our environment.
Well, it's a very challenging effort, and there's been an effort underway for probably 30 some years. It's an abandoned mine discharge for one thing. There's no liability for treatment of it under the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, and we have to work with the private landowner and any entities that want to come into that area to take a look at are there ways to pull that water from the borehole location to another area where it could be treated? Can the water be put into a pipeline type system away from the river and then be treated and utilize both the water for maybe hydroelectric potential, for electrical generation, for removal of the metals? There's been many different types of alternatives to taking a look at the project to clean it up, but we are really talking in the millions of dollars, and there just isn't enough state dollars alone or federal dollars to do it and treat it in perpetuity.
We're looking at if we can facilitate the build out of the pump storage hydro operation, the treatment plant operation, and the related solar installations that would be linked to the pump storage hydro. We could be talking in capitalization in the range of $400 to $600 million. And those facilities, once they're put in operation, they will be generating good family sustaining jobs, perhaps upwards of 30 to 60 jobs that will be, I would suspect, in the range of 80 to 150,000 a year, depending on the level of technical expertise and who's doing what. And
so it has been really a challenge, But we've identified, where the majority of the water is coming from. We've identified the average type of flow that's coming out. We still have monitoring in place at the borehole to tell us the surges that come with the water during storm events. And so we know how long it's taken for water to get into the mine and then flow out of the mine. And that has been constant since 1961 when it was built, at least the conveyance of where the water is coming out of that 42-inch diameter borehole. So we do have a long way to go, but we need private and public investment into that area to really address it, because there is no single source of funding alone that can do it. So I know groups like Bernie McGurl's and the Lackawanna River Conservation Association and EPCAM Bernie's been working at it for well over 30 some odd years. We've been trying to help them for around 25, and we partner together and we try to bring different entities to the table with ideas and innovative solutions to take a look at it.
Yeah, just take Duryea for an example. Old Forge would be the same. Duryea and Old Forge elected officials would have a laundry list a mile long of things they would like to do with grant money. They need new police cruisers, they would like a new community building, they would like these 20 roads paved, they have these stormwater problems here and there, and let's get some grant money to do all that so we can keep taxes low in Old Forge and Duryea. And as an elected official, you go to Duryea and say, hey, I have an idea. Instead of the grant money that might go toward the laundry list of things that you have, how about we direct some of the grant money to clean up the Orange River? That sometimes gets to be a hard conversation, believe it or not. As much as they want to clean it up, they would like to clean it up and get all the things that they have on their wish list. And you're not always capable of doing that as an elected official.
Yeah, I think you're not capable of doing that a lot of times in life. You got a wish list and you got, something that's the largest point source of pollution on the continent. But
It just shouldn't be Duryea and Old Forge's responsibility.
It shouldn't, yeah.
And so, to be fair, even the grant money that we got, the project, did not come at the expense of Old Forge and Duryea. The money that we used for the grant came from the Act 13, the Marcellus Shale activity, natural gas development, which is no small amount of irony in that, that we took money from natural gas development and turned it into money to clean up the Old Forge borehole. But the point is that Duryea and Old Forge weren't going to get that Act 13 money for environmental cleanup anyway. It didn't come at the expense of a police cruiser or a playground. Completely different uses of money that's statutorily prohibited. So the Act 13 money was going to go towards environmental cleanup. The only question was it going to go to Duryea or was it going to go to Pittsburgh?
One of my favorite sayings on history is the past is never really past. I think it looms large. This area would not be here. This metropolitan area stretching from Hazelton up to Carbondale past Scranton I believe it's the largest metropolitan mining area in the country, and it simply would not be here in the same way. It would be much more rural, maybe a little bit like the Williamsport area, although that area also had its own industrial history. So, I mean, I think that an appreciation of the present has to be bound up with an appreciation of that past, and the environmental consequences that have been left behind. Those have to be approached and dealt with. But I don't think it should involve forgetting the history.
Not to mention the human cost for extracting coal. So many people that were killed and hurt badly. The legacy of breaker boys, 9-year-old boys working in breakers, the legacy of company houses. All those things are the legacy of northeastern Pennsylvania with respect to anthracite coal mining. This is another example.
The reality is now that we do need government help in all of this. It is absolutely imperative. And I'm certainly encouraged to see the Biden administration reversing the trend of the Trump administration with regard to our environmental stewardship.
And government's unwillingness to solve problems mostly traces to government's unwillingness to spend money. We have a constant struggle in state government, at least. I'll speak just for state government, but I'm sure it applies to other government levels, where the struggle to prevent taxation and have an honest conversation about tax policy bucks up against how you solve problems like this that cost magnificent amounts of money.
And then when you look at the Susquehanna River, also the mine waste, the industrial waste, and then the whole aspect of human waste because it was our septic tank for many years. And as a result of that today, the Susquehanna River, although much improved, was damaged to the point of almost no return after all of that.
And, you know, if you were to take this orange rock and take it to Carbondale, or maybe that's a bad example, take it to Moscow would be a better example. There's no anthracite mining in North Pocono that I can recall. The people in Moscow may not be so willing to know that their tax dollars are going to go to Old Forge and Duryea to clean up the Orange River. They may not be so forward-thinking to spend tax dollars that way, and especially might push back if you told them we were going to raise their taxes this much because we were going to solve this problem. I'm not sure they'd celebrate that. Some would, and I think that smart ones would, but not all would. And so a reminder of government's inability sometimes to solve real problems.
Well, I mean, one of our hopes is that we continue to get funding for these types of projects that are going to be economic development projects and watershed restoration projects that are needed for the lower Lackawanna and just for the coal region here in the northern anthracite fields in general. We need to have this reauthorization of our federal abandoned mine land trust fund if we're going to continue to get money after September of this year to do A&D remediation work and watershed restoration work. And there's additional funding that could come through other bills that are being looked at, and even in the current administration, they're talking about infrastructure and economic development projects that would bring private investment and other funds to the table that could really look at a project of that scale.
So that's, I think, just the beginning. And as I said, our thesis in 2012 was the development of an eco-industrial park. So if these facilities have an ability to have a multiplier effect, they may be able to attract other industries to be co-located either near that site, on that site, or in the region, in somewhere in the Lackawanna Valley that would utilize water resource and or electrical power.
And there are some things in the works, but nothing's panned out just yet because of the size and scale of that discharge. It is probably number one and number two compared to the Jetto Mine Tunnel in the Nescopec Creek watershed down outside of the Hazleton area in terms of the largest pollution sources to the Chesapeake Bay watershed in Pennsylvania.
Open your eyes. I mean, let's see. On one hand, we have an Orange River. Should we do something or should we do nothing? Well, I think to do something is the right answer. What that do something is, how you define that is really challenging, but to just pretend like it's not there or to hope it all goes away, I'd prefer not to wait 2,000 years for it to clean itself up. I think that the smart thing to do is to take some action. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a role for government there. I mean, and you pretty quickly with this conversation get to a conversation about what's the role of government. For the people who think government should be, small and not intrude in people's lives, and taxes should be as low as possible, so help me God. That crowd, my suspicion is, they want nature to solve the problem of the Old Forge borehole. I think there's another role for government, and that is that when there are atrocities like that have no way to trace who's responsible, and we don't have a way to trace who's responsible for the Old Forge borehole in terms of the mining activity. Those folks are long gone. We as a government and as a community and as a state should step forward and say, okay, this has to be fixed. We know it's going to cost some money, but we think it's a smart thing to do. And you can't be so short-sighted as to just look at the Old Forge borehole. There are problems all across the state. Not all of them are an Old Forge borehole, but there's no perfect communities that I'm aware of. And there's a community in western Pennsylvania may have a problem that has nothing to do with acid mine drainage, but may have something to do with steel production. And slag that they may have in their communities. So I think that we have to, as government, there's a role for state government, there's a role for the federal government in these sorts of projects.
It's going to take some time, but I would hope that some additional funding gets let loose and we can keep our partnerships at the table to see that the water is cleaned up, it gets reutilized. We use some clean energy alternatives that we're talking about here to move forward, and that gives us an opportunity to really kind of expand our efforts on the lower Lackawanna to clean up that portion of the watershed where this major discharge and the dirty outfall are having, pollution impacts to the lower part of the area.
And I mean, there are real successes. I mean, the Lackawanna River from Carbondale down to the Old Forge borehole is a success story. Thanks to Bernie McGurl and others, like-minded individuals that really dedicated their efforts to making sure that the Lackawanna River wasn't a giant sewer. And there were investments that were made in mostly sewage treatment facilities and sewage collection facilities and preventing people from having their own personal borehole that really resulted in a cleaning of the Lackawanna River. And people can fish in the Lackawanna River now. And the Lackawanna Heritage Trail and the canoeing and all that goes along, I mean, it's a wonderful asset for Lackawanna County and the community. But sadly, that comes to an end at the Old Forge borehole. I'm going to do everything I can, partnering with others, folks that you mentioned, in an effort to try and advance the cleanup as quickly as possible. And I hope 10 years from now that there could be fly fishing in the Lackawanna River. I wouldn't guarantee it, but I would hope.
But I would think if we're lucky in the long term and we can secure good industries that would generate 20, 30, 40, 100 jobs at one facility, and 70, 80 jobs at another facility, and 200 jobs at another facility. If there were 3 or 4 of those type of industries that came in and capitalized, in just a million square foot big box kind of capitalization, you could be talking, a couple $100,000 to a couple $1 million for any of those type of facilities. And that's just the bare bone structure. And then you get into what goes inside them, it'd be industry related, and then that could be significantly more. So who knows what it would be.
But I believe that acquisition has occurred, and that property is in the midst of either being sold to another entity for a continuing, ongoing project, or Susquehanna Mining Solution has, I don't know how you say it, like if they were folded into another entity, that is something that's going on up there right now that we haven't been privy to at this point as to where the project is going just yet. And so we're trying to make sure we can get some more updates. And Bernie and others are trying to get information as well from some other private entities that are working in the area that may have some other plans and that may utilize the property that's been acquired for either a potential treatment area, or if that area becomes designated for some sort of ecosystem, not ecosystem, but like an eco restoration and eco park concept down there for different type of entities to come in to look at ways to treat that and utilize that abandoned mine land on the Popple property or former Popple property for treatment.
But those are, I think, some of the things that we want to try to advocate for, because it's part of a 21st century knowledge economy, yet it's also producing tangible products. As I said, maybe one of the industries or several of them could be vertical agriculture or industrial agriculture. So you're going to have technicians working, and maybe those agricultural production technician jobs are just going to be in the $40,000 to $70,000 range for a lot of them. You're just going around clipping and pruning and watering and stuff, but that's, entry level. And then there's marketing and management that's associated with that, and the mechanics of operating those facilities and the buildings, et cetera. So that's one potential area. And, we're in a position to be, a major food generator for the Mid-Atlantic region, and you're controlling all the means of production with that industrial agricultural facility, because you're not dependent on the weather or sunshine or drought or freeze thaw. So maybe you can have a couple different growing cycles, and so it's really interesting what could potentially arise from that. But that's all goes back to the whole idea of eco-industrial operation, and I think as a local resident, I think we're going to want to see that they're responsible, sustainable industries, and and employers and investors.
Because upstream of those discharges, you have pretty much a Class A fishery that's on the upper Lackawanna that is a haven for recreational fishery and people that want to get out on the water. Bernie does the duckathon and the canoeathon and the kayak races. So there's a lot of great opportunities to utilize that river, but the lower 3 miles is not so able to be utilized.